right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so for my final project, I wanted to talk about STEM learning and kind of how hands-on learning and how that's affected with the brain and how that's really one of the best ways to teach STEM classes. And that includes, all sorts, and kind of how that affects, especially at the middle school level, how really teaching STEM and the hands-on ideas and how the brain learns and how that affects that. Okay, so first things first, what is STEM and why on earth do we care about it? Well, here's the thing. We know it's STEM. A lot of us are hearing STEM and how it's really important to teach STEM and all these things, STEM this, STEM that. Well, STEM is, science, technology, engineering, and math. And the reason why it's so stinking important is because it permeates almost every area of our life without really even thinking about it. Science, it's how the world works, how the world functions. Why is the temperature outside warmer than it was yesterday? That sort of thing. Technology. We use it, I'm using it now for my presentation. You use it when you turn on the lights. All that different stuff, technology is so important in today's world and how we use it. And then, we know engineering and then math. I'm a math teacher, and so I think, this idea is really near and dear to my heart. Okay, so all four of these aspects really apply to the real world and how and so when I say the real world, just world outside of school. So it's really important for us as educators to really help students take what we know in class and transfer it outside. So STEM learning really applies to that here. So let's go to the next. Okay. So kind of what we know is, with traditional teaching and how we traditionally teach things, and I know I'm pretty bad about this as well, is we have packets, we've got note-taking, we do the I do, we do, you do model, and then, same thing here, explain, practice, and memorize. All of these things, none of it's bad. Don't get me wrong, none of these things are bad. Okay, doing packets, doing note work. There's a time and place for all of that. But there's always a time and place as well for that hands-on, real-world experience, and how can we apply that to our classrooms? And especially, we have that idea of students that might need a little bit more, hands-on learning, just because they're so busy. Now, it says in the book on page 225, Suzas tells us that one of the leading causes of math anxiety and being upset or scared about math is this idea of, let me explain it to you. Now you practice it, now memorize it. Now you do it, I do it, we do it, now you do it yourself. Now that practice is not necessarily bad when used in moderation, but whenever we use it too much, that ends up giving students that math anxiety and that panic whenever they come into classrooms. I see, I teach 7th grade, and so as a lot of students come into this classroom specifically, a lot of them are scared of math and already, I'm going to be frank, hate me because I'm their math teacher and don't really I've never really understood math and are just anxious and upset even before they come into the classroom. And so the idea, though, that traditional teaching, there are some faults with it. Maybe we could try and fix that with what we have with some STEM teaching and teaching it more hands-on. So that's our question here. What can we do to change that perspective? If we're so worried about how students perceive the world, then we really need to teach them with more hands-on activities that actually apply to what's going on. So I've kind of broken this up to 3 ideas I got from this text. The first one is the idea of novelty. We know novelty, this came from the very second week. So from the second week, whereas those ideas that we're doing things that are more out of the ordinary. What's weird, that's crazy, that you might not expect inside of a classroom. You look around in the classroom, it has desks and chairs and posters on the wall, and you can see all my ducks, but all those things. But sometimes those out of the ordinary ideas, doing things that are out of the box, helps draw the students in and helps them remember, hey, classrooms are not just sit, take notes, use your calculator. You shall do this, you shall do that. All of these things, and it's just these ideas that are, they're out of the ordinary days, but they do serve purposes. And I don't know if you ever read the book Teach Like a Pirate by Dave Burgess. He kind of gets into that idea of, not every day has to be, we will do the notes, we will do this. It will be monotonous, it will be over and over and over again. But bringing some ideas of that novelty and having, having those days where it's more out of the ordinary really helps students. I've actually got some examples of this and kind of how I have used this in my classroom before, and again, kind of reinforcing the idea of what we do. I have some different pictures here. You can see me. Okay, this first one is when we teach probability. This is probably one of my favorite times of the year, just because it's beautiful out and it's in the spring. But if you notice, there's like flying things in the air. That's pieces of egg, because we call it our egg roulette, where we teach students how the idea of simple probability by hard boiling 8 eggs and leaving 4 of the eggs in the container raw. And what's the probability of that you were going to get a raw egg smashed on your head? And we do that every year with each of my classes. And it's just this idea of novelty and doing something different every day, and how that can affect and how we can use that in our classrooms. Another thing that we do is, this is my glow day. Okay, this year we used my room, but we always rotate it amongst the math teachers. But right here, the students are working on adding and subtracting negative numbers. Now, that's something that could easily be accomplished with the worksheet, but it could also be easily accomplished in a glow-in-the-dark classroom. So all these different things, I also have, you see me dressed in black because it's my funeral day. I had a funeral for subtraction when subtraction died. But all of these different things are things that we use, okay, in our classrooms. I've used in my classroom this year, that are just novel ideas that can be used to help students remember things. The idea of novelty, again, is that using out of the ordinary things helps students remember. Because they're going to think back to 7th grade and think, oh yeah, I remember learning about probability. That's when we smashed eggs on our head. Or I remember learning about negatives when our classroom glowed in the dark. Or any of these ideas, because novelty is the idea of having new things that are out of the ordinary, but also serving a purpose. So, okay, next one up is the idea of chunking and teaching. It's the idea of what order do we go in, that's the timing thing here, as well as the chunking. So one thing that really stood out to me throughout this class, sorry, yeah, I space out easily, but throughout this class is that that we have the idea of timing. The most important pieces of our lessons are the beginning and the end. So why is it that we spend so much time on the middle? Or why is it that we don't worry too much about what the beginning looks like or what the end looks like? So I kind of really started messing with my lessons and thinking, well, if the beginning is so important, what needs to go at the very beginning so that way students can understand later on? And then what needs to go at the end to help students wrap it up and to think about it? And then also the idea of chunking. What important pieces, or what order do I need to put my lessons in? Should I put, angles, when I talk about angle relationships with inequalities? Probably not, because they don't make sense to go together. But maybe putting angles with circles and with other geometric figures, that might make a little bit more sense, just because they go so well, because that's the same process. Looking at pictures and then doing the same thing. So again, this idea of how we time things and how we chunk them up is what we kind of have done. I've got some examples of how our team does this, as well as how some other teams do it. This is my I Can tracker. So what we do with this is we give students at the beginning of the entire unit all of their I Can statements. And when I say by I Can statements, they're statements that come directly from the Missouri State Standards, and say, okay, in lesson 12, we're going to be talking about inequalities. So what should they be able to do at the end of lesson 12? Well, I can identify the important properties of what makes something an inequality. And then at the very beginning, they start by ranking themselves. And they say, okay, well, I have no clue what an inequality is. That's a strange looking word and it looks funny. So I'm going to say I have no clue what that is. I'm approaching knowledge. So I am Ron Weasley. Well, or they could say, maybe I know a little bit about what it is. So I've heard the word before. There's the little alligator things, right? The ones, it eats the bigger number. That's Harry Potter. Or they could say, I'm an expert. I have read the material for 8th grade already. I am ready to move on. Let's do this thing. Let's go. They're Hermione Granger. So all of these ideas, giving them things beforehand and letting them know what's coming helps them to picture it and to see what's going on. And that way they know, okay, well, maybe if I'm Ron, let's try and get myself to a Harry level. Or if I'm Harry, let's go to Hermione. And if I'm Hermione, what can I do so I can be, I don't know, Dumbledore, whoever the big fancy person is in Harry Potter. I'm kidding, it's Dumbledore, it always is. But the idea here is though that with this hands-on idea here, is that students now can track their learning, know what's going on, and have this at the very beginning. And know this is what's going to be expected of me, this is what's going to be shown to me, and this is what I should know by the end of this unit. And they'll also know exactly how many lessons there are, so they'll know when they should be expected to test over it. Another one I wanted to show you is from our science department. This is a blank one that they have, but this is honestly what they give students. They put the standard up here, and they put each of the I can statements up here, and tell them, okay, if you can do this, it's a 1. If you're here, it's a 2. And 3, this is where we want you to be. They even give them an enrichment at 4. So even if it could be any of these ideas, they even write in, the students check mark these and go over them with their teacher. If they say, I am only at an approaching level, what is it that I don't understand? And put it right down here, so that way they can get to a developing, or they can get from a developing to secure, or even from secure all the way up to that enrichment phase. So this idea, again, is that we are working with students to help them get that understanding and get what they need, so that way that they are understanding the units and the material and applying it to their own learning. So, and again, this is the idea of chunking and timing, putting things at the beginning that's important, so that way students know what's coming, but then also chunking it up in such a way that students are able to understand it better. Okay, the last thing I really want to talk about is this idea of complexity versus difficulty. And this is the one I was kind of most excited about. And when I read this, the idea of complexity and difficulty and how we use that in our classrooms, I'm like, I could really apply this to my math room. Because the idea is that we have complex learning. Okay, what exactly am I asking of students? Am I just asking them to do tasks, rote tasks over and over again? So like the idea of difficulty is I'm asking them to do it over and over again. Is it a difficult task? Am I having them memorize something? So I think whenever I think of this, I think of difficulty where multiplication facts. Memorizing their facts, doing it over and over again, getting to where they're getting to proficiency that way. And complexity is wherever we think of the depth of knowledge. How often are we actually, not how often, but more along the lines of how difficult, okay, that's a bad word for a sentence, but the complexity is how much thought process goes into this. Am I asking them to say, okay, 2 times 2 is 4, that's an easy, difficult question. But complexity, that's really asking them, okay, to really start breaking this down and say 2 times what number is 32? And knowing that that really is asking what multiplication factor goes there, or what division could you do to find that? So the complexity is the thought process behind it. And I've really always thought through this one. And one of the ones that I really like about complexity is the idea of low floor, high ceiling tasks. And this is actually something that I have read from Joe Buller, or Dr. Joe Buller, sorry, who is a professor out in California. She's kind of controversial. Some people don't really like her, but I've read her book, and I've always enjoyed what she has to say. Because the idea here is that you're giving them tasks that are low floor. And when you say low floor, it's not saying that it's to the point where it's too easy or to the point that they, it's so simple that they can do that it's not hard anymore. Low floor is that they're able to get on board and actually try it. They actually have an idea of what's going on. But then the idea though is high ceiling, is that while yes, it's easy to get on board and actually start it, it still is a complex enough task that that's pushing their brains to think about it. So the idea then again is that there's a time and place for both complexity and difficulty. I really am wanting to apply that in my classroom. Thinking about what task that I give them that where they are able to get on board and start the process of it, but it's still pushing their thinking and expanding their thoughts to the point that it's that high ceiling idea. So Jo Boaler, actually, I found this online, what she said about mathematics. It says that everyone can do well in math, regardless of their prior attainment, and making mistakes, struggling, and persevering, that's all important. In addition, fundamental to the approach is a belief that mathematics is an open, growing subject, as opposed to closed and fixed, meaning it's static, and that communicating, reasoning about, and justifying their ideas are central acts in the works of mathematics. My favorite question to ask students is why? Because it really makes them think and adds a whole other level of complexity to what is going on. So the idea here is what she's saying, is that no matter your prior knowledge of math, no matter what prior bad experiences you could have had, you can still do well. Struggling and persevering and making those mistakes is all important because you're learning it always from that. But justifying your ideas, reasoning through it, and being able to communicate how you did something are very important tasks in math, which is why when I look at my classroom, I love having my students work together to accomplish something because I want them to be able to think, be able to work together on stuff. As well as the idea of struggle here. She says that making mistakes is important. Students struggling through material is important. And math, being able to have that little bit of struggle and a little bit of, not really sure what to do, gives them that time to really reason it out and to figure out what's going on. So letting them think and that thought process and that essentially wait time as well is giving students the time to think their way through stuff and work their way on things. So there she is, and I've got some examples of this. So I love showing tasks. This is one of those examples of a low floor, high ceiling task. What it is essentially is saying, okay, you've got 10 numbers, 1 through 10. What you're gonna do is you can use each operation at least once. And what you're gonna do with this is you're gonna say each number goes in one spot. You're gonna use each operation once. And you're gonna figure out how you can get these. So this is one example of a task that I have done with my 7th graders and giving them things that could be, the idea, low floor, you can get onto the board pretty quickly. Most 7th graders can add and subtract, multiply and divide. And most of them, but then it's also high ceiling because it's making them think and puzzle their way through it. And it's also really interesting to ask them for more than one solution because sometimes they can. And another way to do this, you can do this in multiple ways. So this is how a 7th grader would look at it. I've also had it where, I've seen where, here, go ahead and turn the camera, please. Over here, where they have said instead of, just regular integers like that, they've actually used equals x to the 7th, x to the 35th, and they've used this, but using with exponent operations. So this is something that can be used in multiple grade levels for multiple different tasks, for multiple different meanings, which is what's really awesome. So I really like the puzzles like this. This is also one that I've written. This is one that I wrote for the Super Bowl this year, asking students, hey, we're going to Taylor Swift. Can she make it to the Super Bowl? It has them using outside knowledge, has them thinking about time zones, has them reasoning their way through, okay, if Tokyo is, 17 hours ahead of mountain time, which is Las Vegas, well, what time is that now? What time is Taylor Swift actually singing? What time should she get back to the Super Bowl? And using that as a way to make them think and to use expressions, while also, having that complexity to it and having that multiple steps. So again, that's just some more ideas. I've also included some of the science pictures. I've stolen these from Facebook. You can see, there no kids are shown. But these are just all different ideas of hands-on tasks and examples of where they've put these ideas of students, and actually this is me and other teachers. I don't want to use the student ones, but all these different things that they do to get students engaged and working on things. Like right here, they're learning about the digestive system of a cow, with Play-Doh. They're learning about electricity, right? Yeah, electricity with their, I can't even remember the name of that thing, but it was fun to play with. Now, I'm not even a science teacher, but I remember it was fun, and I remember learning a little bit about it. But I know the students, yeah, so I know the students learned quite a bit, because they were all coming to my room and telling me all about how they were electrocuted in science. And this one I know is about pressure, and this one's the vacuum chamber, and learning about how, whenever you suck all the air out of stuff, it's really cold inside, and about pressure. And this is also right here, they're learning pressure and how that affects things. So science is also, I want to include that because I did say STEM, but I wanted to kind of show you those images and those thoughts, because using these different tasks and also doing labs and hands-on activities really helps students to build that knowledge base while also expanding themselves. Okay, let me take a breath because I talk really fast. Okay, so how can we apply what we've learned? Got 3 things. 1, do some hands-on activities. It can be a task, like giving them a puzzle, like what I showed you. It could be doing some very simple labs. Like one of them, when science was, they had a syringe and a marshmallow, and they were learning about pressure that way. Okay, another one is finding ways to relate what they're learning to the real world. So maybe, in math class, talking about Taylor Swift and time zones and what time you should drive back in the United States and whether she can see, her boyfriend, Travis Kelce, and all that fun stuff. Coincidentally, that's all I know about the Chiefs. I'm not really, I know they won the Super Bowl and that's about it. But, how can that relate to the real world? So even if you don't like that sort of stuff, students are still able to relate it to something they know and how that can work. But then also giving them access to the material. So having that low floor where they can jump on easily, but also keeping your task deep enough that it's complex and makes them really think and puzzle through their way. So I hope this is something that you can use in your classrooms and help you really think about ways that you can be more complex with your thoughts and the way we teach things and make students really start thinking about different tasks. But I really love this, and again, I really liked this class because it really taught me how to make things more complex, but also how we can apply this to our classrooms. Okay, done.